Hi, everybody. Mr. Wildcat, and welcome back to another one of Mr. Wildcat's Seinfeld reviews about nothing. Okay, we are going to be reviewing another episode of Seinfeld today. Last time we reviewed the show's series finale, and today we will be looking at another episode from season 9, one of my most favorite to come out of that final season, The Bookstore. Okay, 17th episode out of season 9, the fourth to last episode prior to the series finale. Originally aired on April 9th, 1998, with 20 and which draw in 29.6 million viewers on its original air date. And might I add that this is the only episode out of the final season of Seinfeld to draw in less than 30 million viewers on its original air date. All right, I feel like this is underrated, but there is a lot to go over, so why don't we go ahead and get started, okay? Before we do, cheers. All right. Whole bunch of different storylines going on, but basically we're gonna try to cover them all in one. So we start off with the introduction to this episode. Now, most episodes of Seinfeld, particularly seasons 1 through 7, starts off with Jerry doing his comedy routine on the stage. For After season 7, Larry David had left the show, and the storylines became more complex, and it wound up requiring more airtime to get the storyline through. So, for this episode, for just about every episode in seasons 8 and 9 of Seinfeld, there is no comedy. There's no Jerry on the stage doing his comedy to begin. We actually have an actual scene. Okay. And this apparently has nothing to do with the actual episode itself, but it's quite a funny skit in itself. So this lasted about 95 seconds. Okay, there's a whole bunch of comedy packed in here, so I might as well go through it. So basically, to set the scene up, Jerry is heading off to do a comedy set. Kramer's on the couch reading some kind of manuscript or something. I don't know if some kind of like setup guide for something or whatever. We don't know. But basically, he's sitting there reading something. Jerry's heading out, and as soon as he walks out the door, basically, Kramer, it's a free for all for Kramer. So Jerry closes the door. Kramer races over to the fridge. All right, we start off with Kramer making a smoothie with a blender, and of course, he's making a huge mess. And how does he clean up the mess? He cleans it up with the cushions to Jerry's couch. Disgusting, might I add. Then we get Kramer. He pulls the bicycle off Jerry's wall. Okay, Jerry's bicycle is basically on the wall. And it's only used for decoration. He pulls off the bicycle and he starts riding around the living room in a clockwise position. Then, guess what? We see Kramer hooking up a garden hose to Jerry's sink in the kitchen. He apparently was in Jerry's bedroom, probably smoking a cigar, and he winds up starting a fire because the smoke alarm's going off. He takes the garden hose, he connects it to the kitchen sink, he races into the bedroom to put out the fire. Okay. Next clip, he's basically switching out the couches, he's basically taking Jerry's couch and he's trying to move it into his apartment. So the doors are wide open and he's trying to squeeze it out, and apparently the couch is caught on something because he only gets the couch halfway out. Kramer gets up he steps on top of the couch to try to go and fix the thing, and apparently he's too tall for the door frame. He winds up knocking himself uh, back onto the couch. He's knocked out, and then the next scene, Kramer has disassembled Jerry's telephone. What the hell is he doing here? But they're right in the middle of dissembling. Like Kramer's apparently eating something because we can't understand a word he's saying. But basically, while he's taking the phone apart, the phone starts ringing, and he basically tries to grab one of the pieces and says, "Hello, hello." No luck on that. Okay. Then we see Kramer. Basically, he's getting into a heated argument with somebody down the street. Now, keep in mind, Jerry's apartment is on the fifth floor. Okay, so he's screaming 5 stories up. He basically dares the person to come up to the fifth floor and shout and say that right into Kramer's face. And apparently, he takes him up on the offer because as soon as you know it, he's zipping up those. They're zipping up that 5 flights of stairs, and he knows exactly which door to go knock on because they're pounding really hard on Jerry's door, trying to get in, and Kramer is sitting there in the process of trying to lock the door to keep him from entering. Okay. Now we do not know exactly how long. We don't know exactly how long this person winds up sitting there. Because before you know it, the next clip we see Kramer rearranging all of the furniture in Jerry's living room. So the couch is up against the window. The chair, which is on the side next to the couch, is now where the couch was. The desk with the computer and all the other stuff has been moved over to the counter that sits in front of the kitchen. The shelf, all right, Jerry's stereo system and all of his movies still intact, sitting up against the door. This is a fire hazard, might I add. What if Kramer has to evacuate the building? Or better yet, what happens if Jerry were to try to come in at that moment? Hell to be loose. Oh, and might I add that the dining room table is sitting inside the hallway that leads to the bathroom and bedroom. So, good luck trying to use either one of those. Okay? Then Kramer goes to sit down on the actual chair. Next thing we know, we basically see Jerry's quilt on his bed. It's hanging up on the door frame that leads into the bedroom and bathroom. Okay? It's hanging up, and then we see Kramer coming from behind the bed sheets wearing some of Jerry's clothing and carrying a wooden spoon, and he's pretending to do Jerry's comedy act. What's the deal with politics? Okay? I don't get it. Am I right? So he's sitting there. What's the deal with politics? Am I right? I don't get it. Okay. Next, we see a tea party. All right. And from my count, there's got to be at least 25 people crammed into the living room alone have for this big party. Okay. They're all sitting there having tea. The next scene, everything's pretty much put back to normal. Kramer is sitting there sleeping on the couch with the same pamphlet that he was reading when Jerry left earlier. Now, we don't know exactly where Jerry was doing his comedy set. We don't know exactly how far he had to go or how long he was gone for. But that was pretty crazy right there that he was able to get everything all back to normal before Jerry walked in. And guess what? Jerry walks in the door, and apparently he had a bad set or he was pretty exhausted. And right off the top of the head, he sees something that he doesn't believe. All right, and you're not going to believe this one. What, Kramer? What the hell did you do while I was gone? Okay, and this is the simplest one of them all. Of course, Kramer helped himself to a glass of soda. He left it on the coffee table. Well, he left it on the coffee table and did not use a coaster. So that's basically the one thing that Jerry catches. He basically pulls up the glass, puts a coaster or rolls over a coaster and puts the glass onto the coaster. And then he starts heading into his bedroom. Okay, while Kramer's sitting there sleeping on the couch. All right, pretty crazy by itself, right? All right. Before we move into any further of this episode, we have to talk about Brent, Brentano's bookstore. Okay, because this is where a huge chunk of the episode is going to be set from here on out. All right. So Brentano's was an American bookstore chain with numerous locations in the United States. It was originally founded in 1853 by August Bertano. Okay, he established it as a newsstand in the front of a New York hotel. It wound up branching out in 1883 with its first branch store in Washington D.C. And in 1884 he wound up opening up a second branch store in Chicago. All right, so basically, they wind up having additional stores outside of New York, including Washington, Chicago, London, and Paris. And on the eve of the Great Depression, the firm expanded rapidly to become the largest bookstore chain in the nation with 4 stores in New York City, plus single stores in Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington. But unfortunately, there was a lot of debt that was acquired, and with them unable to pay, they wound up having to reorganize. And basically, they were forced into bankruptcy. They wound up reorganizing while still being allowed to manage the chain. And then basically, despite the cash flow problems, they opened up a 10th store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1930. They wound up filing for bankruptcy in 1933 after their reorganization plan did not work. They wind up being sold to other individuals who have kept the name Bertano's. And then in around, let's see, 1961, corporate parent Macmillan had acquired Bertano's upon merger with Crowell Collier in 1961 and decided to divest itself of Bertano's by selling half of the retail chain to Bertano's management in 1981. At the time, and as of the early 1980s, Bertano's had 28 stores, including Boston, Washington D.C., Atlanta, Toronto, Dallas, San Francisco, and San Diego. They were forced the individual Bertano's as an individual subsidy was forced into bankruptcy and liquidated in 1984. Part of the liquidation, they wind up becoming parts of Walden Books, and and then eventually Borders. But they were allowed to keep the Bertano's name because they basically brought in the stores brought in more money than they would have under a Walden Books or Borders name. Okay, so it's an upper scale. Basically, it was a upscale bookstore, right, or an upscale brand of the Walden Book division. Okay, so the stores were still managed, but they were still being managed by Walden Books under the Bertano's name. However, increased competition during the 90s and 2000s from superstores and internet websites forced Borders to close the money-losing Bertano's and Walden Books locations. On July 18, 2011, Borders Group filed for bankruptcy, and all remaining Bertano's bookstores had closed. Bertano's today is just a memory, and this is one of those. This episode serves as one of those long-time memories. Okay, back in the day when we actually had actual bookstores. Okay, so now that we know the history, let's dive into the actual episode. So basically, we start off at a Bertano's. Okay, there's like three or four locations in New York City. We are in one of them. We see Jerry, George, and Kramer that are basically hanging around in this bookstore. And why are we at the bookstore today? Because George has recognized that this is the newest place to meet girls. Okay. Kramer goes reading through the bookshelves, and he basically comes across some books about rickshaws. All right, and how rickshaws are become popular in Hong Kong, and he's ashamed that he wants to get his hands on a rickshaw before everything goes back to China. You better hurry. Well, unfortunately, to Kramer, the Hong Kong's transition to China had already passed. So I think we ought to talk briefly about that. Okay, so that's Hong Kong is a city and special administrative region of China on the eastern Pearl River Delta in South China. Has about 7.5 million residents of various nationalities. It is a 1,104 square kilometer territory, one of the most densely populated places in the world. It's also a major global financial center and one of the most developed cities in the world. All right. Now, basically, a lot of this has to do with Hong Kong used to be a British colony. So basically, Hong Kong had settled into Hong Kong in 1839. Okay, and it basically Hong Kong Island had formerly ceded to the United Kingdom in the 1842 Treaty of Nanking. Okay, Nanking, Naking. Okay, so let's see. So basically, there was a huge at the turn. The colony was further expanded in 1898 when Britain obtained a 99-year lease of the new territories. And basically, this would take us through 1997, okay, when Hong Kong had been transferred over to China on July 1st, 1997, after 156 years of British rule. Okay, George decides to hit the hay. He comes across this very expensive book on French Impressionist paintings. Okay, and he takes it into the bathroom. He's planning on reading it while he's sitting there doing God knows what. Whether he's peeing or taking a shit or just sitting there doing God knows what. While George is in the bathroom, Jerry and Kramer come across Uncle Leo. They see him from a distance and basically saying, "Hey, there's Uncle Leo. I mean, there's Leo. Who? Uncle Leo. Oh, Uncle Leo. Forgot his first name." And while they're sitting there noticing Leo, they basically Jerry comes across something that he's not too proud of. Uncle Leo takes a book, he hides it inside his jacket. He's shoplifting in the bookstore. Did I just see that? That'll keep you busy for a couple days. Grand Kramer decides to take off. Meanwhile, we are over at. Okay, so that's. All right. So basically, George's book is World Impressionism by Norma Broad. All right. And I believe she's still alive today. So she, born May 1st, 1941, is an American art historian and scholar of feminism in 19th century French and Italian painting. She is also a professor emerita of art history at American University, which I believe is in Washington, D.C. Okay. Broad with Mary Goward is a early leader of American feminism movement and both having redefined feminist art theory. Okay? So basically, very amazing. It's very amazing how in Wikipedia, publications from Norma, World Impressionism featured in the Seinfeld episode The Bookstore. God almighty. Okay. So basically, we go over to this banquet hall, okay, where Elaine is having another one of those annual parties for Peter um, at the Peterman catalog, okay. Peterman is throwing another one of those annual parties, okay. The previous season, in season eight's The Little Kicks, when Elaine was in charge of the catalog, she basically decided to throw one of those annual parties herself. And it happens to be in the exact same banquet hall that this is being held at. Okay, so to get you an idea of like what had happened in the previous time, Elaine basically decides to make a toast. Okay, well, apparently George had invited himself to that party, and he wound up grabbing up all these quesadillas. They were so tasty, and they kept ignoring the whole section. He was eating up all the hors d'oeuvres and stuff. But Elaine basically decides to make a toast. Here's to those who wish us well, and those who don't can go to hell. And that episode was very infamous with Elaine's basic dance. Like basically, they were playing the song "Shining Star" by Earth, Wind and Fire. When you wish upon a star. Okay. One thing I have to mention before we go further. I will not be posting audio clips or video clips of Seinfeld in my reviews. Same why you haven't seen me doing clips from Married Children in my Married Children reviews. It is because of one thing and one thing only: copyright infringement. It is the one thing I choose not to get involved with. All right. By including clips and audio of shows like Seinfeld and Married Children, it opens up the door of possible copyright infringement, and that's an avenue I wish not to go anywhere near. All right. So if you're here to look at video clips and of the show and stuff, you're in the wrong place. All right. So basically, we fast forward to this the banquet hall for this episode when everybody they're all bombarding Elaine about whether or not she's going to dance. Hey, are you going to dance? Yeah, all over your face. Oh, if you choose to dance, the cooks missed the last one. They want to be brought out to the kitchen. Okay? She refused to dance. And she is so humiliated with everybody bombarding her over whether or not she's going to dance again. Peterman decides to make a toast. Not as memorable as Elaine's toast from the year before, where she says, "Here's to those who wish us well, and those who don't can go to hell." They basically start playing the same song, "Shining Star" by Earth, Wind and Fire, except instead of doing the little kicks that Elaine did, he's basically doing the same shit that he did on Dancing with the Stars years later on ABC. Okay. Elaine winds up meeting this guy, Zach. Okay. And I'll tell you a little bit later in just a moment. But first, we're going to head back to the bookstore. George is done doing his business in the bathroom, and he's basically attempting to put the book back on the bookshelf. But there's one little problem. By this point, the bookstore manager is sitting there in the back. He's either doing inventory or he's helping stock the bookshelves or whatever. He catches George coming out of the bathroom with the book. Excuse me, sir, what are you doing? I'm all set. Did you take that book with you into the bathroom? What do you want to hear? So then we shoot over to the coffee shop. George was forced to buy the book. And guess how much it cost? $100. All right. Now, one of the things that the Married Children podcast love to do on their episodes They take like dollar figures that were referenced in the episode, and they like to adjust it for inflation. Like how much would that much money back then cost in today's money? So I thought we had to give it a try. All right. So let's see if we can find ourselves a. Okay. So $100. So because this episode was made back in 1998, so how much would $100 in 1998 be worth now, or how much would that $100 book cost George? 182 around, according to inflationtool.com, it would come out to about $182.75. Wow, that's a lot of money. Okay, so George is now pissed off. They made me buy it. $100 this thing cost me. You're surrounded. They're selling coffee, brand muffins. You're surrounded by reading material. It's entrapment. And meanwhile, Jerry's sitting there drinking a cup of coffee and having lunch. Okay, eating there. I don't know if he's done with his sandwich, but he's sitting there munching on fries. He notices the book, French Impressionist paintings. George, okay, the pastoral colors seem to soothe him when he's trying to. Thank you very much. George, when George starts describing like why he went with that particular book to go to the bathroom with, Jerry loses his appetite and he still had some fries left on his plate. He hands it over to George. Okay, so George's plan now is to go back later when there's other people working and return the book. He invites Jerry to go catch a movie, but Jerry unfortunately can't make it because he's meeting Uncle Leo at the coffee shop. I can't. I'm meeting Uncle Leo here. I saw him shoplifting at the bookstore. All right, Leo, sticking it to the man. Then Elaine comes in. All right, she's hungover. She didn't dance like she did the last time. Instead, she made a bigger ass of herself. She wound up making out with this guy Zach on the table like there was no tomorrow. And she's basically freaking out about how embarrassing this is to her and her status. Which basically, I am an associate. Hey, me too. Yeah, me too. Then George basically gives Elaine advice saying, why don't you tell them that you're dating? That way you don't have to be called the office skank. You basically just call yourself an intimate moment. All right. We then head back to Jerry's apartment for the first time in this episode, and we see Jerry. No, Jerry walks into the apartment. Kramer and Newman are sitting at Jerry's table with some maps and stuff. Hey guys, can I fix you guys some drinks and some sandwiches? No, but you can get some of this shit off the table. Basically, Newman knows somebody at the Hong Kong post office, and they're going to ship. Kramer and Newman are going to receive a rickshaw. All right. When Kramer was mentioning to Jerry in the bookstore earlier in the episode about the rickshaw business that he had thought about, well, he's going to make it happen in New York. Notice how big of a business it was in Hong Kong. Well, he wants to try it out in New York. And Newman happens to know somebody at the Hong Kong post office who's going to ship a rickshaw in order to try it out. Now, Jerry basically has no confidence in these things. Okay. But then, of course, he winds up raising a question that neither Kramer or Newman were prepared to answer. Who's gonna haul this thing? But then they decided, what about the homeless? Can't we worry about them later? To pull the rickshaws. Oh yeah, they do have a huge knowledge of the streets. Why don't we just strap something to them? Now that's the most sensitive idea I've heard all day. So then we head back to the coffee shop where Jerry is confronting Uncle Leo. Basically telling Uncle Leo that I saw you at Bertano's the other day. Why didn't you say hello? Because you were too busy stealing a book. You still say hello. You can get arrested. Oh, come on. I'm old. I thought I paid for it. Okay? We all do it. What, criminals? Senior citizens. Okay? Uncle Leo is basically pleading ignorance, saying that all old people steal. And Jerry's trying to put some last common sense into him, saying, you can get arrested. Okay, I'll do it for you. Okay? So then we head to the Peterman catalog where Elaine is talking to some coworker about what had happened at the party. And they open up the door and they find Zach having sex with some other female coworker, and Elaine is pretending that he's cheating on her, and he decides to use that as an excuse to break up with him, thus escaping the title of office skank. Okay. We then head to the park. I think it's Central Park, I believe it is. Kramer and Newman, they finally got their rickshaw from Hong Kong, and there's a couple of homeless people that are in line for the job. All right. Their first candidate is Rusty. All right. Take it to the end of the street and bring it back. Let's see what you got. Rusty winds up stealing the rickshaw. It's gone. And they decide to fire. They decide to fire his ass. And then we have another homeless guy who takes it. I'll take the job. Potato salad. Who comes up with these fucking names? And then we head back to the bookstore for probably one of my most favorite moments of the whole episode. George, he brings his toilet book. We're going to call it toilet book because it's the book that he wound up getting caught taking to the bathroom. He was forced to buy it. Right? He attempts to return his toilet book. Yes, I need to return this book. Beep. I'm sorry, I can't get this book back. Why not? It's been flagged. Flagged? It's been in the bathroom. It says that on the computer. Please take it home. We don't want any of the other books. Well, you just lost a lot of business because I love to read. Now, basically, unknown to George, when he was forced to buy the book, they flagged it in the system as being in the bathroom, thence making it entirely impossible for him to return the book for his money. All right. So George is now pissed off because he's not able to return the book, at least at that particular location. He huffles off. Jerry, who was sitting there with him, he sticks around for a moment. He turns around. He catches Uncle Leo in the bookstore again. And guess what he's doing? He's stealing another book. I don't believe this. He comes across a security guard who basically he attempts to put a scare in Uncle Leo. He wants to scare Uncle Leo straight, making the point that shoplifting is bad. All right. So he rats out Uncle Leo to the security guard, saying, "I need your help with something. My uncle's having trouble shoplifting. Who is over there? I want you to put a scare in him. Try to scare him straight. We got a 5150 in paperbacks. All units respond. Swarm, swarm!" You have like 3 or 4 guys who come from all different corners. They basically they corner Uncle Leo and they basically open up his jacket and there's books coming out. Hey, I thought I paid for it. I'm an old man. I'm confused. You're under arrest. I just wanted you to scare him. Jerry, you ratted me out. Hello? Hello. So Uncle Leo unfortunately got himself into a lot of trouble. All right? Instead of being put into a scare, which is what Jerry wanted, Uncle Leo wound up getting arrested. All right. So then we go to commercial, and when we come back, we find Jerry. He's on the phone with his parents. Word got back to Jerry's parents about what happened at the bookstore, and they basically approach Jerry saying, like, "How wrong? How could you do that to Uncle Leo?" "Oh, I didn't mean to have him arrested. I just want a security guard to scare him straight." And then and then his mother basically tells him he's not going to survive a day in prison. He has priors. It was a crime of passion, and they want him to leave it alone. Okay. Turns out Uncle Leo has a past. His crime of passion, whatever that is. Let's see if I can look it up. So, crime of passion, okay, according to Wikipedia, crime of passion is basically referring to a violent crime, especially homicide, in which the perpetrator commits the act against someone because of a sudden, strong impulse, such as anger or jealousy, rather than a premeditated crime. All right. So basically, whatever Uncle Leo had done, it's going to come back to haunt him now because he now has priors. But then, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Seinfeld, they're trying to shrug it off as if, like, besides, it's not stealing if it's something you need. Nobody pays for everything. And now Jerry's pissed off with his parents because they're stealing. And guess what they're stealing? Batteries. They tend to run out pretty quickly. Or at least that's what his father says. As for his mother, sometimes your father forgets, so I have to steal them. Jesus Christ. We'll get to this in my review in a little bit. But then Jerry gets off the phone, and Kramer and Newman, they come into Jerry's apartment. They basically break the news to Jerry that the rickshaw's gone. We strapped it to a homeless guy, and whoop, he bolted. And then Jerry basically says 85% of rickshaw businesses tend to fail within the first few months. Okay, they basically decided, like, we should have gotten some collateral from him, like his bag of cans or his other bag of cans. So a bag of cans, if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, okay, a lot of these in there's a few states in the country, especially in New York, okay. There's basically soda cans in particular. All right. Every time you purchase a soda can, anytime you purchase like a soda can, and in other states like alcohol or water, they charge you a deposit on each can and bottle. All right. Like soda's the most common, so we're going to talk about that. So like there's a wide variety. There's like about a dozen states in the country, mostly in New England and the Great Lakes, that basically charge like 5 or 10 cents a can or bottle that you buy, and then you bring them back to the grocery store to get your money back. Homeless people, they go walk down the streets, they collect these soda cans off the roads, and they turn them into the stores to get money. And then they use that money to either buy food or to buy drugs or whatever else they want. All right. So that's what that means. They decide to go. They decide to go find this rickshaw. So they decide to hit. They decide to split up. You're going to check the soups kitchens, and we're going to check the schmogel boards. And as they're about to leave, Jerry shouts, "To the idiot mobile," in reference to the Batmobile from Batman. Okay. Then we're back at the coffee shop. Jerry and Elaine are talking about Zach and about like how to get out of the relationship. And then George winds up coming into the coffee shop with his toilet book and basically starts he starts getting frustrated because this book has been flagged. Well, this book is flagged in every database in town. He's been to every Bertano store, and every single book, or every single store has that book database, has it flagged in their database. So he's not able to return to any Bertano store. Now Jerry's trying to talk some sense into George. Is it very difficult to have to keep a book? I don't know what the big deal is. They let you try pants on, not underpants. Of course, that's true. Would you want your scrotums touching a piece of cloth that was touched by somebody else's scrotum? I wouldn't think so. Okay. Then we see Uncle Leo in the coffee shop. He's about to leave, and Jerry tries to stop him, saying that he's sorry about what he did, and he didn't know about his past. Uncle Leo's response: anyone who betrays me, I never forget. He then storms out of the coffee shop. Jerry's basically running after him to try to talk some sense into try to make peace, asking for forgiveness. Okay. So then George comes sitting. Then winds up taking a seat across from Elaine, and then Elaine winds up checking out the book that George has been carrying around, French Impressionism. Oh, I love this. Now, what is the problem with this book? Nothing. How much do you want for it? I can let it go for about $125. So, $125 in $125 according to dollartimes.com. $125 in 1998 is now worth about $230 in 2023. All right. So he's trying. So George is trying to make a profit, and of course, knowing him, he's very sleeky, and he's trying to sell Elaine a book that's been soiled. That's probably the best way of saying it. Okay. Jerry then comes back into the coffee shop. Leo's furious. What is that doing on the table? I'm not eating any. George is trying to tell Jerry to shut up or to simmer down because he's trying to make the sale. But before he can finalize, he rats George out. I'm not eating anything in the vicinity of that book. What is wrong with this book? That book's been on a wild ride. George took it to the bathroom. All right, biohazard coming through. Elaine basically lets go of the book so quickly, she screams, gets out of the couch, gets out of the booth, and goes racing to the bathroom to wash her hands. Now George is extremely pissed because Jerry just cost George a sale. And of course, Jerry says, like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. How can you? Elaine is my ex-girlfriend. How dare you try to sell your filth to her? Okay. So then George basically asks, may I ask, what do you read in the bathroom? I don't read in the bathroom. Well, aren't you something? Okay. We then head back to Jerry's apartment, and Jerry's sleeping, and he basically is having nightmares. Basically, you have all these different things coming across. Basically, Jerry's mother saying, um, it was a crime of passion. It was a crime of passion. Anybody who betrays me, I'll never forget. Then we wind up having this Cape Fear moment where Uncle Leo's in prison. Jerry is written on one set of knuckles, and hello is another one. He's doing pull-ups in prison. Jerry, hello. Jerry, hello. Jerry, answer my damn phone! His phone is ringing. It's Elaine. She's having to. Basically, Elaine is now being forced to take Zach into her under her wing. Turns out Zach is a drug addict, And Mr. Peterman has instructed Elaine to help him quit cold turkey, help him go through that sobering process. And if she doesn't, Peterman will strip Elaine of her associate status. Oh, by the way, the first 24 hours is a nightmare. Better bring poncho. So Elaine's sitting there basically, my fake boyfriend's having real withdrawals. I'm burning up. Away from the soup. Away. Use your bucket. There you go. Basically throwing up. Jerry then goes back to sleep. And then Kramer, who had heard Jerry talking in the bedroom, he comes snooping in the middle of the night, talking to Jerry. And Jerry is basically politely trying to tell Kramer to get out. And then Newman winds up coming aboard, telling Kramer that somebody had found a rickshaw in Battery Park. It's entirely possible. And then Jerry screams, I want everyone out! So they decide to go into Jerry's apartment where Kramer's going to make some cocoa. And next thing you know, we head to the park. Kramer and Newman, they find Rusty and the rickshaw. And basically they say, we'll get back to you. And they decide to take this, they're going to find some way to get this back to their apartment complex. Okay? How are we going to get this? All right? It's ridiculous for the two of them to carry them simultaneously. So they basically have to play some kind of game in order to figure out which of the two is going to carry the rickshaw and the other one and which gets to ride it. Kramer unfortunately gets the honors of carrying the rickshaw. So basically Newman is sitting there on the rickshaw in luxury as Kramer is riding through the city. Okay. We then head to this thrift store, which is run by Rebecca De Mornay, played by Sonia Eddy. Now, this Rebecca De Mornay character, she only makes 2 appearances in the show's history, and this is her second and final appearance. Her other appearance was in season 8's The Muffin Tops, which she played a lady from the homeless shelter or the soup kitchen. Okay, in that episode, Elaine and her former boss, Mr. Lippman, they go into a partnership on a muffin top business, and they decide to deliver the muffin tops to the soup kitchen. He's trying to be nice. Unfortunately, Rebecca De Mornay shows up at the muffin top bakery, saying that the homeless people do not like the muffins. They're receiving so many complaints about who ate the muffin, and gives them a warning that she does not want to see one more muffin stump on their property. Okay? So back to the book thrift store. So basically, George is now attempting to sell this book to other parties. He wants to donate this to charity at the thrift store, assuming that there's some sort of write-off. He basically values the book at $200. Trying to scam the thrift store. But while trying to inspect the book, George, okay, hits another wall, hits another dead end. It turns out Rebecca De Mornay is a former employee at Bertano's Bookstore. She inspects the book, and right away she says, wait a second, this book has been in the bathroom? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. It's been flagged. I know. I used to work at a Bertano's. Mister, we're trying to help this homeless here. It's bad enough we have some nut up there trying to strap into a rickshaw. I'll just take 50. Do we have a deal? Yeah, and here it is. You get your toilet book out of here, and I won't jump over this counter and punch you in the brain. I can take it to merchandise. Here I come. Kramer, oh my God, George is now so fucking scared of this lady. Okay, he attempts to, when she basically starts ripping George apart about trying to sell a soiled book and confronting him about what he's trying to do. George decides to take less money. He's willing to take a loss at this point and say, I'll trade it in for a few bucks. And then he attempts to, instead of getting cash, he'll trade in for actual merchandise. And she's about to come, but no, she's about to come after him, and he scrams right out of the thrift store. Then we head back to the bookstore. We see Jerry and Elaine who are at the checkout counter. Elaine is at the bookstore buying a book on how to get puke out of cashmere. Okay, and while they're reading up the book, and while the cashier is reading up the book, she tells Jerry that the worst is over. He's clean. They can break up, and now she's the office hero. And she even got an idea out of this experience: the detox poncho. So she heads off to do her uh, personal business, and then Jerry basically asks to speak to the manager. Okay, you're gonna find out what it is for in just a moment. But first, we head back to the streets. Kramer and Newman are sitting there trying to. They're basically still in the process of trying to transport that rickshaw back to their apartment. They wind up going up this hill, and about halfway up, Kramer needs to take a break. He puts the rickshaw down for a moment, and one thing Kramer needs to understand is that you do not stop in the middle of a hill, especially with something on wheels, because that's going to go rolling right down the bottom of that hill. He puts the rickshaw down. Newman goes rolling down the hill on this rickshaw. And guess who's at the bottom of the hill? Zach, who has just been clean and sober. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. But before he can enjoy any part of it, Newman and the rickshaw, they wind up running. Zach winds up getting run over by Newman and the rickshaw. And Kramer, seeing exactly what's happened, he wants no part of it. He tries to sneak away as quickly as possible, and he zoops around the corner. Now, for those of you who have watched this episode on TV, whether it's through syndication or on network reruns, this is where we have a credit and a commercial break, and then we come back to do the final scene with closing credits. But on the original broadcast and the DVD release, we basically see that final scene before we go to the credits. All right. This final scene, we're back at the bookstore. George decides to come back in. Jerry's surprised to see him here, especially after what happened. George, what are you doing here? I can't sell the book. It's been marked. Certainly has. So I'm going to steal another one. Then I'm going to return it. That way everything is even. You defile one book, steal another, ask for your money back, and to you that's even. I'm going in. George is having a serious trouble trying to sell this book. It's been marked. Nobody wants it. So now he's come up with one last straw in the cards. He's basically just going to steal another copy of this book. Hopefully, it's not marked or flagged in the system, and he's going to return it to get his money back. When the truth is, all he's going to do is cause shrink on the bookstore side. Basically, it's a discrepancy in inventory between what you have in the system versus what you have on hands. Okay, it's basically going to cause a shortage at the books on the bookstore side. But for George, out of hell with it. It's going to even him out. Okay, so he decides to head out for the sales floor. And while this is happening, the bookstore manager approaches and talks to Jerry just like Jerry wanted to talk with him. Jerry wants to talk to the manager regarding Uncle Leo, who was caught shoplifting the other day. Oh yeah, my Uncle Leo was caught shoplifting here the other day. Yes, Uncle Leo. I remember him. I'm sorry, our policy is we prosecute all shoplifters. Oh, come on, he's just a low young man. All old people steal. That's right. That's why we stopped carrying batteries. Look, I'll be honest with you. We've had a lot of trouble with theft lately, and my boss said I have to make an example of someone. So it can be anybody? I'm like, yes, yes, as long as we catch them in the act. So basically, all right, all they have to do is, well, they have to make an, because the bookstore has been encountering a lot of theft, they have to make an example. And the policy is they prosecute all shoplifters, and an example has to be made. But it doesn't say like exactly who it has to be, as long as it's somebody. When Jerry hears about this, he looks at George and he wonders, if I was to rat George out and make him the victim of the shoplifting scheme, maybe this will let Uncle Leo off the hook. So basically, he points at George. That guy, swarm, swarm. No, Jerry! And that's the end of the episode. Okay? There is a deleted scene, which unfortunately, okay, basically it's just Peterman back at the office talking to Elaine. Zach took a huge hit on the rickshaw that Newman ran over him with, and now Elaine's now forced to take him back under his age, under her care, and then tells Elaine, "Oh, by the way, the detox poncho, swing and a miss." Okay, so basically, let's see what else. Let's see. So basically, Jerry's story in this episode was inspired by a news item that the episode's writer Spike Furstein saw on TV about the rampant shoplifting being committed by the elderly. All right. The table read for the episode was held on February 14th, 1998. The opening montage of Jerry's apartment was filmed on February 16th, followed by a live audience taping on February 18th, during which most of the other scenes were filmed. At the last minute, the Kramer story for the episode was dumped. In the original story, Kramer finds an overworked cabbie named Mohabit, played by Ted Davis, sleeping at the wheel. Kramer offers to take over his shift for a few hours each day, but his incompetence as a driver leads to the taxicab being towed. Mohabit and Kramer then use Kramer's car as a taxicab. This story was replaced by the rickshaw story with Newman, which was filmed on March 1st. To get the sequence with the runaway rickshaw, which was filmed on location in Los Angeles, the rickshaw was hitched to a truck which pulled Newman actor Wayne Knight along, and the truck was erased from the shots in post production. All right. So these rickshaw scenes you see at the end of the episode, this was actually filmed in downtown. This was not filmed in New York, but was filmed instead in downtown Los Angeles. And they had to be very careful with how they did the camera angles because they did not want to mix one city up for another. They don't want to show to the viewers that it's obviously downtown LA when it should be New York City. All right. I've never been to New York City, so I don't really know if they do have steep hills like they do in this episode. So if you've been to New York and you have seen something, please let me know so I can put that to ease. Okay. One more. Let's see. There is one more piece of trivia that I should bring up before we go into my rating and review of this episode. In the episode, Jay Peterman referred to opium as the Chinaman's nightcap. The episode prompted many Asian American viewers, including author Maxine Hahn Kingston, to send letters of protest. In her letter, Kingston wrote that the term is equivalent to niggers for blacks and kikes for Jews. Media watchdog Media Action Network for Asian Americans, otherwise known as MANAA or MANA, called on NBC to issue a public apology. NBC did not issue an apology, but it removed the offending term from the episode in the episode's rerun in May 1998. NBC's executive vice president for broadcast standards and content policy, sent Mana a letter stating that the network never intended to offend. Mana was pleased with the studio's response despite the lack of an apology, and Kingston, while disappointed that there was no apology, was pleased that the term was removed from the episode. All right? So, time for the rating. All right? As I said before, this is one of my favorite episodes of season 9. Basically, you have George taking the book in the bathroom. You have Kramer with the rickshaw. Very funny stories there. We then get the we then go back to the banquet hall that Elaine used to do the little dancing on, and we thought that she was going to get to do another dancing, but she's actually learned her lesson. All right. This episode was a little underrated. However, personally, I felt like this episode didn't feel like it was finished. There are a lot of questions that remain unanswered. Okay, and I wish I would have gotten to see a little bit more of this episode. Right, and unfortunately, you only get 22 minutes in a typical episode, so you have to find something to. Okay, you have to find some way to please everybody. Okay. But this one, there's a whole bunch of stuff that remains unanswered, and I really wanted these answered. And this kind of pleases me that they did not get answered. So basically, questions were, okay, we did see like George was upset with Jerry that he fingered him out. I wanted to see what happened after this scene had taken place. I would have seen like how pissed off George was at Jerry and whether or not they were going to speak to each other again since, and like, Jerry, what the hell were you thinking? Ratted me out. How dare you? We would like to, of course, we saw that that George never got to get the book back. I mean, he never got to return the book because he got busted for it. But another question I have is like, since Jerry had ratted out George in an effort to um, save Uncle Leo, I would have loved to have known whether or not Uncle Leo got off free, and if so, whether or not Uncle Leo was able to make peace with Jerry about what happened. And of course, we never unfortunately get to see anything like this happen. Like, Uncle Leo never makes another appearance on the show until the series finale, and even then, he doesn't have any dialogue. And if he does, there's no dialogue between him and Jerry. Okay? So that's unpleasant. We also see, would have loved to have seen like whether or not Newman had gotten injured, or if the rickshaw had actually gotten destroyed when it went tumbling down the bottom of the hill. Okay, and whether or not Kramer would have gotten busted for what happened with the rickshaw incident. Okay. And of course, you have Rebecca De Mornay, who basically makes a reference to Kramer and Newman, saying like they're nuts. Okay, calling them both nuts. It's bad enough we have some nut out there trying to strip them to a rickshaw. Okay, so a lot of unanswered questions, and although I would like to give this a high score, I have to take points off for these unanswered questions. All right, because quite honestly, I feel this episode is half baked and it's not fully complete, with at least without these questions being answered. So with that in mind, I am going to give the bookstore. Okay, we're going to be using the same. Before I give you my score, I like to explain to you that we use the same rating scale that I do on my Married Children reviews, which was adapted from the same rating scale that the Married Children podcast uses to review their episodes of Married Children. Okay? You're on a scale from 1 to 5. 5 is a Hall of Fame episode. 4 is really loved it. 3 is liked it okay. 2 is di- I didn't like it. 1 is hated it. 0 is extremely hated it. Would never in my life come across this episode ever again. All right. So out of 5, I think we're going to pull. Okay. How many rickshaws are we going to pull for this episode? And with all those questions in mind, I'm going to pull 3.5 rickshaws out of 5. Okay. We're going to cut one rickshaw in half and carry it as a lightweight. All right. So that's all we have for today. If there's a particular episode of Seinfeld you would like Mr. Wildcat to review, please leave suggestions and comments in the comment section below. And same goes for any episodes of Married Children or Home Improvement that you would like me to look at, or anything else in general. Okay? Until the next time we meet, Mr. Wildcat is reminding each and every one of you to be good, be careful, and behave. That guy, swarm, swarm. No, Jerry. Da 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 da.